All right, so now that we know that this is the final update, right? They set it down here somewhere. This was the final planned update. Yeah, so this is this update for Grounded. This release is not just another update, it's the last planned update. So they don't plan on doing anything else with it. That would mean that the team is moving on to something else. What games are Obsidian currently working on? Avowed is coming out sometime this year. I can't imagine it would make sense to move people from this game to Avowed when it's that close to finish. What else are they working on right now? The Outer Worlds 2? Maybe they could move them to that? I mean, to me, this game had over 20 million people tried it. It's going to be higher than that now because it's coming out on PlayStation and Switch. The update might bring some people back. Maybe they'll do like a free weekend. A smart thing to do would literally do a free weekend, like right before the update, right when the update comes out. Would it not make sense with this game having had that much reach? Now, granted, a lot of this was because it was on Game Pass, but if they make a sequel, it would be on Game Pass as well. And Xbox is probably looking for games that get a lot of engagement, since a lot of the recent games did not do that well in terms of engagement and retaining players and stuff like that. So I think it would make sense to just have them start working on a sequel if they haven't already done so. I mean, they've put out what? This will be the fourth update since the game finished in September of 2022. In 18 months, they've done 4 updates. One of them was right afterwards. The one right afterward felt like most of that stuff was probably planned for 1.0 and they couldn't get it in. And then everything that's been added after the fact seems to have been things that were probably originally... I feel like all this stuff was originally planned and they just didn't get into the game. I don't think this was new ideas they had after the fact. So what would make sense to me is, like, why would you not make a sequel? It's a popular... People recognize it. It's going to have a television show coming out at some point. I would have guessed this year. They haven't said anything about it, so it should be... I mean, we haven't heard anything about it, what, like a year or something like that? Maybe longer. I can't even remember when they originally announced it. But I feel like with this going to all the platforms, it would make sense for them to work on a sequel. Like, that would just be the logical next step. Now will be the time to start working on a sequel for this. Maybe they already started working on it and they can, like, later this year, they just put it out. Maybe at the Xbox showcase in the summer, they reveal like a trailer for the sequel or the prequel, whatever one, something like that, or a spin-off of it, something like that. Because I think they could take this foundation. There is a good solid foundation for a game here, and I think they could easily build upon it and make an even better game. It's a good game. It's a good survival game. I would say it's near, like, eventually I'll do a tier list of the survival games I played. It will be near the top of the tier list of survival games I've played. And I think most people agree it's very well regarded. Like, I haven't really heard anybody just completely crap on the game and say they hated it. Everybody that played it said they liked it. Obviously, those of us that played it during early access might be a little bit more harsh on it because of we don't agree with some of the decisions that were made. But in the end, it ended up being a good game. And I think they could, given the time and the fact that they waited for, they've been able to, like, fully flesh out this game at this point with everything I think well, not everything they planned, but as much as they could, that they could easily expand upon this and just make it for the next gen, like make a sequel. But I would say one thing I would caution would be, I think the big issue with this game was the fact that it was released at the end of one console generation and the beginning of another. So it had to be supported on the previous generation of consoles, which means it was held back by those limitations. Like, we all already know, like, the Xbox Series X is far more powerful than the previous generation. The Xbox Series S is holding back games now because it's not as powerful as the Series X. I would say if they're going to release a sequel, they should plan it for whatever's after. I would not even plan it for the Xbox series of consoles. It would only be whatever's next. Whatever the next Xbox is, if there is one. Obviously on PC, PlayStation 6, the Nintendo Switch 2, with no support for the current generation of consoles, because releasing a game at the end of a console, at the, like, crossover of console generations, literally holds you back. Like, this game was 100% held back because of the limitations of the old hardware. The memory constraints, they actually set it themselves. Memory constraints held them back. I'm sure there was a lot more they wanted to do. Example being, like, look at the number of enemies in the game. There's a decent amount of enemies, but, like, if you go in your backyard, go get a magnifying glass and look in your backyard when it's warm outside, you're going to see a hell of a lot more. I mean, just one little anthill, like one little tiny anthill in your backyard will have hundreds of ants in it, if not more. And there'll be all kinds of bugs all over the place. They're limited on how many bugs they could have in the game, how many items they could have in the game, how big the map could be, because it's running. It has to be able to run on, like, at this point, what, a 10 or 15-year-old console? When did the Xbox One come out? 2013. It's been more than 10 years. It's running on a console that's more than 10 years old. They make a sequel, it needs to be just the new gen, not to be held back by Xbox. No, it needs to be the next gen. Not even, do not even be developing it for Xbox. Do not develop, at the very minimum, it cannot run on Xbox Series S. They got to dump that completely. That alone would kill it.